Hello, you're listening to Count Richard von Coudenhove Clergy. Happy Midsummer, 21st of June. And today I'm coming from on board a train called Slieve Gullion on a trip from Dublin to Maynooth. Now, I'd like to start my video off with just to thank people for all your kind words and condolences on the passing of my friend Emmanuel. He's a great loss to me, and thankfully there's so much video out there of him in interviews that there's certainly plenty of to have a reminder of us, of the character and absolute superb talent this man actually had. Now, I'm just going to use the video as a backdrop for making my video today, and that in the distance there is a circus in Fairview Park. So basically, I suppose I'd start with just a little bit about the railway. That the Connelly is Maynooth is on the Sligo to Dublin route, and it's 14 miles to get to Maynooth and 111 miles to go to Sligo. And the railway line opened in 1862, and it took 3 hours and 45 minutes for the train to make that journey to Sligo, and we have improved on that time by about 20 minutes. Modern day trains now do it in about 3 hours 15 minutes. Now, the Railway Preservation Society owns 9 steam trains and a couple of diesel trains, and this particular one was built in 1913, and it's called Slieve Gullion, and it is one of 2 that are active at the moment. Most of them are held in the museums up in the north, but every now and again they'll take one out of service and put it back into full working order, and thankfully it did 4 runs this weekend. And so this is a thirsty beast. It does roughly 50 miles for every ton of coal and 35 gallons of water per mile. Imagine that now. So you can see Croke Park there on the left hand side as we're going along at a leisurely pace, which I assure you will get quicker. And at Dublin we're playing Donegal, and an exciting game, I'm sure it will be too. But it's a lovely way to see the city when you're used to travelling by road. To go by train is such a wonderful way. Now, Ireland actually had a very active train lines prior to occupation and with independence, but the 3 of the most powerful trains built were trains that were built in Inchicore in 1939, and they were called the Maeve, the Mocha and the Talcha, and they had a pulling power of 42,000 pounds and carried 5,000 gallons and 8 tons of coal. And they would use between 32 and 40 miles per ton of coal and up to 45 gallons of water. These were very big and powerful machines. And interestingly, to give a comparison with the UK, the Mallard steam train, which had a maximum speed of 126 miles an hour, which it did for 1 second in 1938, would burn 60 miles per ton and 550 gallons of water per mile, rising to 100 gallons depending on the pulling capacity and the gradient, and average speeds of up between 70 and 90 miles an hour and pulling up to 15 coaches. So these are big powerful machines, but that only had a pulling capacity of 35,000 pounds. So the Irish trains, the 3 Irish trains, and one of them I believe is in the Ulster Transport Museum, and they were actually more powerful than the English trains. So it would have been very interesting to see if they ever had a race from, say, Dublin to Cork or the equivalent distance in the UK, who would have won. And interestingly, the previous record was held by a German train that did 124.5 miles an hour, and on a straight stretch of rail between Berlin and Hamburg in 1936. Now that speed was done on the flat, whereas the Mallard, when the British did their record, it done it on a slight decline, but also in the process of doing so did serious damage to its bearings and causing some of the pistons to overheat and melt, and limped back into a train station for repair, whereas the German train continued on its journey with no problems at all. Now, interesting to note, during the Civil War, this particular route was a target, and Sligo's train station was attacked by up to 40 men on the 11th of January 1923, which saw widespread destruction of trains and carriages, and the bridges at Connelly and Drumcliff were blown up. And also on this route, past Ashtown, on the 19th of December 1919, Dan Breen and others mounted an assassination attempt on Lord French, who was Viceroy of Ireland and commander of the armed forces, British forces in Ireland, when he was returning from a trip to Roscommon. The Ashtown ambush failed, unfortunately. French was actually sitting in the first car rather than the second car when the IRA sprung their attack and managed to get through, but in the process an IRA man was killed and 3 policemen were injured. And Ashtown also has Ashtown Lodge, which was the home of IRA man and musician Martin Walton. Now, Sean Tracy was later on killed during the War of Independence in a shootout on Talbot Street, which was covered by Pathé News, who had a camera crew filming on the street at the time. And I'll see if I can actually find that piece of film and put it in here now. Now, this is a picture of Lieutenant Bryce discharging his Webley revolver before being shot dead himself.
Neither will if we whim a Mario Shano Tesse, at the head of a Foshnish Blactre, a Dakalov lodger. Hanny we a couple of Revishaw, as a Galo Ruher, a Togo Hach, Deaton and Ogley. The Henyan Blactre Kian Rishe, Lelin Rucherella is Roger Talbody, who saying Lecklish, as Mario yet Bert, le pistol of the Ruher. You Lorsch in the Nar, Spreach Urcheren on a void heart van Tride, as Mario Buchelog, as Fermaniusta.
Now, that recording caused much embarrassment to the British government of the way that the man handled Sean Tracy's body. And in fact, most films that, if you look and search for it, won't show that piece where his body's been thrown into the back of the truck. And in fact, this footage is taken from the film Saoirse, which was directed and produced by George Morrison, which is a follow-up from Misha Era. But extraordinary scenes, and in fact there's a great selection of pictures from that event in Dan Breen's book, My Fight for Irish Freedom, which I recommend as a read. Very interesting read. Now back on board the train. You can just about hear the lovely sound from the engines. Plenty of smoke anyway. They use smokeless coal, by the way. And I came across some stations that I haven't heard before. Pelletstown, I think, was one. So I suppose with the amount of development that's going on on this particular route, a lot of it is apartments. Extraordinary amount of apartments. I just did this route. It would have been September 2022, and I can't get over the amount of development on the way. This side is actually heading towards Maynooth, so the canal will be on the other side. And if I may, I suggest that the canal side is a much prettier route. Now, the next story I want to talk about is a story that was uncovered about the amount of money that was spent dealing with Ukrainians regarding medical cards. And I'm going to read through that article now. More than 100 million spent on medical cards for Ukrainians. This guy Albert Dolan, I have to say, he's done great work. I'll just read through that briefly. 100 million has been spent on medical cards for Ukrainians refugees living here since 2022, the Irish Daily Mail can reveal. New figures confirm almost 34 million was spent last year on medical cards for people receiving temporary protection from Ukraine, bringing the total to 101 million. A further 21,500 people were granted or were seeking asylum in Ireland, where assured medical cards or free GP visit cards through the health service last year. This really is the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? It's no wonder they call it Treasure Ireland at our expense. Terrible stuff. And yet you see cars with Ukrainian cars with no tax, no insurance, no NCT driving around, and that doesn't seem to bother people. Extraordinary. Now, the other item that caught my attention was the vote in the European Parliament for re-immigration, where there were chants of get them out, echoed through the chambers, and there was a considerable difference between the so-called right-wing vote, which is not just right-wing but common bloody sense, and those that were protesting and let them stay. And there's a couple of abstees, a couple of those MEPs abstained as well, and I'd be very interested to see if Aidan O'Riordan was one of them, as he's normally abstains. So I'm going to play that video for you now.
Next item on the agenda, the report by Mrs. Brigmont on the EU-Pakistan Agreement modification of concessions on tariff rate quotes. Vote on consent by roll call vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. We move to the... It's adopted. Please, we are gonna continue the votes. We have to vote. We had another point to debate about these items.
But I just decided to check there on the vote. 26th of June 2026 passed regulation which notably allow member states to transfer rejected asylum seekers to return hubs outside of the European Union. The Irish delegation split their vote regarding the legislation, which was approved a majority of 418 to 218. Against, Lynn Boylan, Kathleen Function and Aidan O'Riordan. Well, he did vote this time, which surprised me. And all four Fianna Fáil MEPs, Billy Kelleher, Cynthia Ní Murracu, Barry Andrews and Barry Cowan, along with independent Luke Ming Flanagan and Kieran Malooly. I'm surprised at that now. Yet again, Malooly abstained. In favour, Regina Doherty, Nina Carberry, Sean Kelly vote in favour of the legislation. That's the results from the Irish MEPs. Now, the next piece I want to cover is a bit about an aircraft I spotted, and it's turned out it was actually a deportation flight from Dublin to Johannesburg. Now, I was at home the other day and I heard one of these beauties flying overhead, and this is an Airbus A340. Beautiful sound out of it. This one's picture taken off from San Francisco, and you can see the vortex coming off the wingtips of the aircraft there as with the humidity and air density. Wonderful stuff. Now, what I found very interesting about that aircraft was that it was on a flight to Johannesburg, and there were no direct flights from Ireland, from Dublin to Johannesburg. So I decided to do a little bit of digging, and it turned out that the aircraft was hired to bring a deportation flight of 42 people from Dublin to Johannesburg. And it was a 12-hour flight, and those kind of aircraft now, there you go, on Thursday, would be in the region of €20,000 per hour. So it's an extraordinary amount of money. And so it was done by private charter. And I watched the aircraft on Flight Radar. And there you go. So just I thought I'd show that in there. And about the money, the amount of monies that have actually been spent. Other countries where people have been deported via charter flights are Nigeria, Romania, Poland, Lithuania. And it is, in reply to Deputy McGrath, Minister O'Callaghan stated that the charter flight services are provided by Air Partner Limited under contract entering into November 2024. That particular aircraft was owned by South African Airways before it went wallop, and Air Partners is based in Frankfurt in Germany. So the term of contract with Air Partners is for $5 million over the lifespan of the contract. And the term of contract is 3 years with a possibility to extend it twice by 1 year, a potential lifespan of 5 years. So isn't it extraordinary the amount of money is involved in this? Instead of just, you know what I find interesting? That you have EU meetings between Ireland and the UK regarding the airspace and seas around Ireland, that they have allowed the RAF and the Royal Navy to use either Irish ports or Irish airspace while the Ireland has its EU presidency. And yet, as an island of Ireland, we have the greatest natural defence, which is called the sea. So surely to God, if they can have that level of cooperation at EU level, why can they not have cooperation that nobody gets onto the island of Ireland, north or south, without proper papers? A340 there, passing over Wicklow. There you go, left 12 minutes ago, heading to Johannesburg. And the usual cost per hour for this type of aircraft would be in the region of €20,000 an hour. So as to why it costs 750,000 for this flight alone, I have to say is it shouldn't be more than $250,000 in my opinion, considering it's a 12-hour flight. So there's almost 11 hours still to go as it heads down there. Now, another interesting thing I spotted was 2 RAF aircraft over Wales. I'll just see if I can keep an eye on them now. So it's amazing. These are all the transatlantic flights that we see going over Ireland. Extraordinary. Turkish Airlines. So they have these rail corridors, or air corridors, should I say. And interesting, the private jets. Let's see if you can pick a private jet here. They are allowed to fly above 40,000 feet, whereas the passenger ones are lower altitude, so they don't clash. Now there's a private one now. Let's see what he's at. 38,000 feet. Not available. Dassault Falcon. Lovely aircraft. 3-engined aircraft. Now, let's see if I can find this flight I was talking about. Now, this is the flight I was talking about here. The two of them over Wales. In formation. And one peels off. Goes back to Coningsby. Estimated speed in 25 minutes. Now he seems to disappear. This is the one I was looking for. And this guy here appears to fly across the Irish Sea and in over Gorey. Imagine that now. Now if you click him here, he seems to disappear, but his flight actually is doing 357 knots at 12,425 feet. But yet when you put the thing back on, he seems to cross the Irish Sea. So I suspect it's just a glitch in the system. But let me see now. Oh, we're going the other way. There you go. He's just off Gorey, and then zap kaboom, he disappears. And I suppose one of the things that I found very interesting was that since the invention of air travel, anywhere up to 250 billion people have travelled by air. Now this flight radar here, I'm just going to go across and you can see the number of flights, this over Russia and Europe. Flight radar is such an interesting app. It's like something out of a petri dish, and you can see the different corridors which have flights and those that don't. And 80% of the world's people have never been on an airplane. Imagine that. And it is believed that up to 5 billion people travel in single flights every year. That's something. You can see why Flight Radar is is my favourite app. Isn't that something? Now speaking of Flight Radar, it's not an interesting one. Madrid to Toronto, diverted to Dublin. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any news about that and what happened there. Oh God, they certainly got far enough out into the Atlantic before they had to divert. Imagine that. So they left at 1:30, and now the estimate would be, well, there you go, 1 minute and 23 seconds. Imagine that. So it's gone 4 hours 34 in the air, and 12 miles left. Imagine that now. Now the other piece I want to play is Senator Ronan Mulling bringing up the issue of if we're supposed to be living in an Ireland for all, why do some ideologies get more preferential treatment than others? Also about regarding the displaying of certain type flags and ideologies, especially during the month of June, which are distasteful to some people, including myself. But he does a great speech in the Senate, and I'm going to put that piece on here now.
Many of us, yourself included, I think, will have received a very reasonable letter from Mr. Declan McKenna, not previously known to me, regarding the use of LGBT and transgender pride colours within the branding and public communications of government departments, and he specifies the education departments. He says that the inclusion of these symbols may be perceived as endorsing particular views on gender identity and sexuality that are not shared by all citizens, and he stresses that he fully supports the dignity and respectful treatment of every person person regardless of background or beliefs, but he doesn't believe that a government department should be seen to promote any particular ideology concerning gender or society. And he says the primary remit of the government is to serve all children, all citizens, children, young people and families impartially, and he says that state institutions should seek to maintain a position of neutrality on matters that remain the subject of significant moral, philosophical, religious and societal debate. And he requests that state departments review their use of such symbols and consider adopting branding that is inclusive of all citizens regardless of beliefs and that remains focused on the core functions and responsibility of the departments in question. And he says that the flying of flags other than the national or EU flag outside of government buildings is also highly inappropriate. I think he's absolutely right on every point, and I would ask that we would have a debate on the privileging of certain ideas, ideologies and symbols at taxpayers' expense by government departments. And this is very relevant because when we privilege certain organisations, we see like what happened last week with Minister Norma Foley, when she was challenged and asked about highly inappropriate books being pushed at children by Children's Books Ireland, the same organisation that's looking for 68 million of taxpayers' money to fund modern inclusive books in libraries. Highly inappropriate sexual material being pushed at children as young as 15. And her glib answer was to say that she hadn't seen the book and saying it's a problem for parents to deal with. Well, that negligence on her part is unacceptable. But then former Minister Charlie Flanagan gave the lie to even that by saying that he approached her about the very same book in 2023 and talked about the inappropriate content, and she laughed in his face. Now, I believe that Minister Foley doesn't like those particular kind of books, but this is what happens when people get into government and they are captured. And they think that if they stray beyond supporting certain ideologies, that they will lose their position or their place. And that is shameful on the part of the minister, and it is shameful on the part of the government. So we do need a debate on the very issue that Mr. McKenna has raised, and we need to ask questions about why an organisation that gets public funding like Children's Books Ireland is pushing sexual material at young children at ages that are inappropriate. It is...
Now, the other unique feature of this train is that it has a full bar on board, which includes draft Guinness. And back in the days when you couldn't get a drink on Good Friday, I had many a steam trip on one of the railways journeys up to Mullingar purely for the ability to be able to get drink. And a very nice Guinness it was too. In fact, I remember one time taking a trip down to Rosslare, from Connelly to Rosslare, and as we were leaving Connelly station, the bar opened and one of the supervisors was asked by a passenger would he like to have a drink, and he said no, he never had a drink before Greystones. So there you go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it, I did a walk through the bar, and I'm going to put that video in there now to give you an idea of how beautiful the bar on board the train is.
I'm on the train, okay. I'll be down to do it, thank
Sorry, do you want to get through there?
Oh, sorry, thanks.
All right. Now this time I found myself in by a window right beside the train. I should have gone there in the first place. Just the most beautiful sound of the engine huffing and puffing. Extraordinary. As you can see, it's starting to pick up its pace and then engages in the whistle. Now the next video I want to play, although it's not in Ireland, it's to do with the last speech given by Tulsi Gabbard as she leaves office as Director of Intelligence. Personally, I thought her appointment by Trump as Director of Intelligence was inspired, as she had done 2 tours of duty in Iraq and knew the responsibility of combat. But I thought she gave an excellent speech, and I was thinking to myself, could you imagine what country this would be like to be if we could only get that level of honesty from our elected leaders? So I'd like to put that video in now. Just extraordinary views there, isn't it? Wonderful stuff.
Years of lies and censorship and cover-ups, the American people deserve transparency, truth, and accountability. The tactics that were used to hide the truth are straight from the deep state playbook. Politicized self-serving leaders like Dr. Fauci covered up their own wrongdoing and abuses of power, manipulated intelligence, lied to Congress, and undermined a duly elected president by restricting his access to the vital facts he needed to keep the country safe. It's time you know the truth. For the COVID pandemic, Dr. Fauci, as head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, provided millions in U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund dangerous gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, work which is now widely viewed as the source of the unintentional lab leak that sparked the pandemic. Now, in support of President Trump's maximum transparency mandate, today, on my final day as Director of National Intelligence, I'm releasing never-before-seen communications and documents that expose exactly how Fauci worked with politicized career leadership in the intelligence community to suppress the truth about his actions, the virus's lab leak origins, and his role in directing U.S. funding for this dangerous research that caused immeasurable harm and countless lost lives. Now, these documents expose Fauci's direct role in influencing and manipulating IC assessments on COVID-19 and how Fauci lied to Congress in 2024 when under oath he denied knowledge of or participation in discussions with intelligence officials about viral research. We also received testimony from multiple intelligence community whistleblowers who reported retaliation for challenging the intelligence community's manipulation of intelligence on the virus's origins, once again revealing a clear pattern of suppressing dissent, silencing critics, and burying the truth. Dr. Fauci's close relationships with the intelligence community enabled him to assume 3 key roles that shield him from scrutiny. First, Dr. Fauci funded dangerous gain-of-function coronavirus research linked to Big Pharma and their pursuit of universal vaccines worth trillions of dollars. Second, Dr. Fauci was the behind-the-scenes advisor who, alongside his hand-picked so-called experts, pushed the intelligence community to endorse a natural animal origin to hide his dangerous gain-of-function research that he funded using taxpayer dollars, all of this in a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth and shift the blame and attention away from Fauci's own actions. Third, Dr. Fauci became the nation's pandemic pundit, and he publicly pushed lies, disinformation, and censorship using every platform available. Now, according to hundreds of reviewed emails, which are included in this release, the intelligence community almost always incorporated Fauci's recommendations. He promoted a fraudulent paper whose publication he helped prompt as legitimate information for intelligence community consideration. Senior analysts praised Dr. Fauci not as a policymaker, but as what they called an unbiased guide to the real coronavirus experts, while deliberately ignoring experts who might dissent from Fauci's narratives. Now, Fauci didn't stop there. He blatantly lied to Congress under oath during his 2024 testimony to the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, denying that he ever spoke to any intelligence agency about COVID. Now, the correspondence I'm releasing today directly contradicts his sworn testimony. Now, we received statements from multiple whistleblowers revealing that the intelligence analysts who dared to challenge Dr. Fauci's COVID origin conclusions faced threats of retaliation, marginalization, and many suffered career setbacks. For example, a contractor was terminated just days after coming forward to ODNI as a whistleblower. Another example, those who advocated for the lab leak hypothesis or expressed dissenting views were reminded by their managers that leadership would determine which analysts would be promoted and which would not. The message was clear: go along or be punished. Senior leaders also sought to undermine whistleblowers by removing anonymity, which is required in the whistleblower process, as they made their complaints, and also insisting that their managers or attorneys be present during ODNI meetings where these whistleblowers were coming forward with their testimony, obviously creating an atmosphere of intimidation. The COVID pandemic caused tremendous hardship and pain for millions of our fellow Americans and countless people around the world. Now, after years of lies and censorship and cover-ups, the American people deserve transparency, truth, and accountability. The tactics that were used to hide the truth are straight from the deep state playbook. Politicized self-serving leaders like Dr. Fauci covered up their own wrongdoing and abuses of power, manipulated intelligence, lied to Congress, and undermined a duly elected president by restricting his access to the vital facts he needed to keep the country safe. It's time you know the truth.
Now, it's funny how the homeward journey always seems a lot quicker for some reason. And I suppose the last bit at the end really was with a bit of the resignation speech from two-tier Starmer in the UK. And it's amazing to think they've gone through 7 leaders in 10 years. How about that? I wonder how many of them, or all of them, came up through the Klaus Schwab's and his Young Leaders programme. That's passing the M50 there. And the canal, of course. But I'm going to leave a bit of that in. And I just think this journey is just such a nice journey. And I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And the view is spectacular. So I'll end it with that speech by Starmer. So listen, I hope you enjoyed my little trip on Slieve Gullion. I always appreciate your comments, and I try and reply to each one of them. And I'll say good night, good luck, and God bless, and God save Ireland from all those who want to do us harm. And I'd just like to leave a photograph of the crew who provide that service on this lovely train on Sunday. And I look forward to the next opportunity of being able to enjoy this train again. Good night, good luck, and God bless.
Nobody likes me. Nobody wants to be my friend. Well, I don't want to be friends with any of you again. Never ever. Especially you.